Okay, it's 4:30, and I guess we will kick off this session. First and foremost, good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are. For those who don't know me, my name is Shankri Kurupalani, and I'm the Policy and Membership Advocacy Manager here at the EU-ASEAN Business Council. Before I pass my time over to the experts, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsor, Roche Diagnostics, for making this webinar possible. Just perhaps if I could share with everyone really shortly in terms as to why we at the council has been looking quite critically at digital health solutions quite recently. First and foremost, COVID-19 has caused a rapid digital transformation across multiple sectors, and we at the council believe that the healthcare sector is no exception, and we expect the demand for healthcare services to only increase in due time given the region's rapid aging population. And we do believe that digital health solutions can be a path forward. But again, the lack of harmonization against regulatory frameworks do continue to act as a hurdle. So that's why we at the council are quite proactive in the situation, and we're honored to be able to host such an expert panelist this afternoon. So without further ado, I'll pass over my time to the moderator, Chris Hardesty, who's the director for healthcare and life sciences at the KPMG, and also a really good friend of the council. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you. I like that last part in particular. So thanks as always to the EU-ASEAN Business Council for hosting such a fantastic forum. By my counts, we have quite a diverse audience, so a mix of public and private sector in terms of governments, payer organizations, care providers, pharma companies, device companies, academia, research groups, and I think from around 24 different countries. So really just a fantastic group here, and I look forward to hearing from all of you as well. So I think Shangari has given my name and title. In addition to that, I do serve on the healthcare committee for the EU-ASEAN Business Council, which is quite active. So about 2 or 3 years ago now, we published our kind of multi-year plan for the different topics that we were aiming to tackle over the years to come. Of course, at that point in time, we couldn't have necessarily predicted COVID-19, but I think a lot of the principles of what we stood for as a committee still very much apply. And so I'll just talk a little bit about that, and then we'll get into the sort of content for today. So one of those initiatives we undertook was a look in Southeast Asia at the sustainability of health system design related to the onset of the implementation of Sustainable Development Goal number 3 for universal health coverage programs, which much of the region is driving toward. And there are some issues that we have to tackle, such as the allocation of GDP toward healthcare, which is about half the world recommended average. You know, we looked at government budgets in terms of the rhetoric around prevention and the actual allocation of resources, and only around 10% of budgets are going toward preventative measures. We're short about 4.7 million healthcare workers in Southeast Asia alone. And even if you look at the financing side of health systems, you know, you need to be able to tax at least 15% of your GDP in order for it to be a sustainable source of social revenue. And almost no country in Southeast Asia taxes 15% of its GDP. So this is part of this other program that we've been leading with the EU-ASEAN Business Council to look at the sustainability of the design of health systems. So we've kind of got that on one end of the spectrum. And on the other end of the spectrum now, we've got digital health, right? Which if you look at COVID-19, a lot of the digital health platforms have seen utilization increase by 4,000 some odd %. We see a lot of governments, including in Southeast Asia, that are actually reimbursing different parts of the digital health value chain. And there's a really great map, and it's something that APAC Med, which we'll talk more about in just a minute, has put out, and how the WHO has basically drawn parallels between the implementation of UHC that I just spoke about and digital health, and where these things intersect. So there's a really interesting opportunity and kind of dichotomy of thinking here. And I guess the point of the discussion today on the regulatory side of things is sometimes there's a bit of a mismatch in the speed, right? Where we're going really fast to digital health and trying to, you know, adopt these tools that offset some of the health system challenges I talked about previously. But at the same time, we have to make sure that they are properly assessed and are safe for our population. So that's really what we're going to get into today. And the whole sort of preface, I think, for today is the work that Roche and APAC Med have done around framing out regulatory frameworks for digital health in the Asia Pacific region. So I recommend everyone to have a look at that. APAC Med formed a digital health committee during 2020. And so we look at areas like interoperability, cybersecurity, reimbursement, and also regulatory. So a great opportunity to get plugged into the discussion. And I think for today, really here we're talking about the kind of medical grade digital health. So not just every kind of app and wearable, but really those that are, software embedded into the medical devices, or those that are using AI or machine learning for clinical decision making. So that's the kind of part of the spectrum that we'll be focused on. We've got a great panel today that I'll introduce shortly. So just in terms of agenda, we'll go through each panelist kind of one by one, and they'll be able to talk a little bit about themselves and their role in the ecosystem and just their reflections on this topic of digital health regulation. And from there, really just looking forward to hearing from you out there. If you have questions or comments and you want to put them in the Q&A or the chat, happy to have a look at those and address those as we go. So I think a few objectives for today. One would be to help you understand what are some of these frameworks that are being designed for regulation of digital health. So we are actively working on such concepts, as you'll hear from the group. I think secondly, to look at how we can harmonize some of these ideas across a region. And so you hear from different stakeholders about that. And then finally, how can public and private sector continue to work together on such a topic to ultimately achieve the higher level ambition, which is again, concepts like universal health coverage empowered by digital health. So I hope that's of interest to everyone, and that's why you've turned up today. And again, looking forward to hearing from you in the chat and Q&A as well. Before I jump into the panel and start getting their reflections, I just want to flash the poll results. So maybe Shingar, you can tell us how the audience is feeling out there. Okay, sort of what I suspected. So a little bit of a mixed crowd. We're not, I call this the Goldilocks scenario. We're not too optimistic, we're not too pessimistic, but kind of right there in the middle where I think people are feeling potentially the power of digital health, but more discussion is needed. So that's great because that's the purpose of today. And I think some of the ongoing activities hereafter. Okay, well with that, what I'll do is start shifting into panel mode so you can really hear from the more interesting people on this call. And again, I'm going to go through each one by one, and they'll talk a little bit about their reflections. I have a specific question for each one to ask, and then we'll open it up. And if you as an audience have points you would like to raise as well, then please do feel free to put those in the chat and Q&A, and we'll address them. So first I'd like to call on Dr. Fernando. He's head of the health division at the ASEAN Secretariat. So earlier when I was talking about kind of regional harmonization and regional look at this, he's a great person to be able to talk about that. He's worked on many programs over the years in his capacity in terms of lifestyle and kind of preventative techniques, combating rising threats as we faced over the years, and access pathway programs. And he is a family physician as well, based in Jakarta. So very much a passionate and spirit for the healthcare space. So yeah, Fernando, I do have a question for you, but I'll just pause there. And if you want to say anything first, and then I'll ask you a question, okay?
Thank you so much, Chris. A pleasant good afternoon to all of you from Jakarta, Indonesia. And it's my pleasure as well to meet the other distinguished representatives in this webinar. And apologies if there would be some points during my intervention that I may lose connection. It has not been very well and very good since this morning. But I'm very appreciative of the organizers from the European Business Association of ASEAN Council for inviting us, as well as for allowing a representative from ASEAN Secretariat to be part of this webinar. Over to you, Chris.
Great, many thanks, Ferdinand. So maybe just ask you a question before I come on to the rest of the panel. As I said earlier, you're looking kind of across ASEAN. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about some of the variability perhaps in the uptake and awareness of digital health in the region, and how the Secretariat is trying to kind of rationalize a bit the approach going on.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. Allow me to share with you some perspectives and some points. As mentioned by my colleagues, I am the Assistant Director and Head of the Health Division, and as such, it is under our responsibility or purview to facilitate and coordinate matters pertaining to the deliverables or expected outputs of our ASEAN health sector, including the cooperation with other partners. And based on addressing varying levels of awareness and uptake on digital health solutions in the ASEAN region, um, this can be based on the following. The first point, firstly, the regional initiatives relevant to digital health solutions and, of course, apply digital technology in health and other non-health sector stakeholders should have its mandate from the ASEAN Blueprint or Roadmap, particularly the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint, and also the ASEAN Sociocultural Community Blueprint for 2016 to 2025. So this is very essential in terms of policy level support. The strategic measures in this roadmap, as well as its action plans in this roadmaps, address common gaps, challenges, and needs that have to be addressed by the relevant concerned sectors in the ASEAN architecture, such as the ASEAN health sector or the ICT industry sector. That's the first point. And also, aside from this overarching roadmaps, the mandate for digital health technology has its basis in the endorsed regional work programs of the sector concerned. In the case of the ASEAN health sector, we have the ASEAN Health Development Agenda and its corresponding health priorities, along with its various health clusters, focus on promoting healthy lifestyles, responding to all hazards and emerging threats, ensuring food safety, as well as enhancing health systems and access to care. Aside from this second point, addressing varying levels of awareness and uptake would also have its basis in terms of responding to all hazards and emerging threats by applying digital health solutions that have been demonstrated at the regional level, particularly in the COVID-19 response through the management of, for example, big data analytics and visualization. So we are talking about applied technologies already, wherein this big data analytics and visualization provided situational assessments and risk assessments and also technical exchanges in information sharing. This is a regional initiative. Coupled with this would be capacity building projects through training activities of focal points in each of the ASEAN countries, which have been conducted to build the skill and enhance knowledge in the use of these digital technologies relevant to biosafety, biosecurity, or other initiatives on prevention, detection, and response, uh, or other initiatives in the control and management of communicable and emerging infectious diseases. This has been demonstrated through the operations and functionality of networks of ASEAN on emergency operations centers for public health emergencies, or demonstrated through the networks within the region for disease and laboratory surveillance, and also those involved in mitigation of biological threats. And a fourth point, or a fifth point rather, would be, you might say, a proof of concept, no? The development of an electronic ASEAN portal for public health emergencies, which is also part of the COVID-19 response by the ASEAN health sector in cooperation with other non-health sectors. This has been developed and currently being enhanced, and also specifically enhanced in the design to address the challenges of the ASEAN countries in accessing data and information. This would involve historical and new data, no, related to public health emergencies, particularly in COVID-19 related information, which is critical from the start of the pandemic until up to now, with the developments of variants, the progress of vaccines and other medications for the management of COVID-19 uh, uh, COVID-19 situation. This portal will enable ASEAN member states, as an example, to access the necessary information that is relevant to COVID-19 response. In addition to this, we also will utilize this portal for experts discussion through the discussion forum functions of this portal that will enable interactions between the registered users, no? Not only among the technical experts, but also through the public. And also in terms of strengthening health systems and access to care, particularly in the aspect of strengthening universal health coverage and also sustaining regional activities in promoting universal health coverage. There are upcoming initiatives that are regional that would include technical exchanges and sharing of good practices in UHC systems from other more advanced and progressive countries. And there are also development of relevant knowledge management system for information accessibility. And coupled with this would be providing customized information and e-learning contents on UHC. And these are just examples of proof of concept wherein we are demonstrating at the regional project level how we are going to address the, might say, disaggregation or varying levels of awareness and uptake on digital health technology or digital health solutions among the relevant stakeholders within the ASEAN region. Again, just to summarize, you need to have a policy mandate to support the initiatives. The policy mandate have to be operationalized through feasible and practical activities at the regional level, and these activities should be applicable and should be relevant and beneficial to the peoples or the officials of ASEAN community, that it would address the gaps and the challenges that they have identified that is common in the region. And of course, it's not only a mere implementation or localization of policies, but also providing the proof of this concept that is really useful and applicable to the needs of the local communities. With that, I end my initial intervention. Over to you. Thank you.
Well, first of all, many thanks for taking time out of your schedule to join today. I know there's a lot going on, and also thank you for so openly sharing about the initiatives that are underway and some of the pathways that all of us, I think, can learn from and to engage with you. I heard a mix in there of some of, I know, the passions that you have in the healthcare space combined with some of the newer types of technologies. So that's a good blend there. And I also like that you brought up capacity development and started to talk about how we share some of these frameworks. So that's a good segue. Let me call on our next panelist, Varun Vegas. Varun is the Regulatory Affairs and Policy Lead for Roche Diagnostics in the Asia Pacific region. He's also the chair of the APAC Med Digital Health Regulatory Working Group. So that's this paper that I referenced a bit earlier. Yes, Varun, I do have a question for you as well, but let me pause there and see if you want to add anything else at the beginning.
Nothing to add except, I'm really happy to be here. Happy to have Dr. Ferdinand set context for us. There are definite opportunities in the ASEAN region, and the idea is to have at least an initial conversation to kickstart some of these ideas, processes. Also happy to have HSA, who always is a great collaborating agency. So that nothing changes there. And of course, we are also happy to have MDA Malaysia on the panel, and Dr. John Thornback, he was also the co-author of the APAC Med position paper. So I'm really happy to be collaborating with John again.
Great, thanks a lot, Varun. So here's my question for you. Obviously, Roche, you're a driver of the innovation in terms of medical devices, diagnostics. Also, you guys take a leading role in digital health topics. So, how are you guys trying to reimagine the regulatory landscape a bit in terms of the whole digital health space?
I think, Chris, it's not us trying to reimagine the regulatory paradigm. It's already happening at the agencies. What we are trying to do is we are really trying to bring this knowledge back to Asia Pacific region, because clearly, it's exploding with technology providers, small to medium enterprises, in addition to organizations like your Roches, your J&Js, and your Strikers. What we are trying to do is we are trying to create a collaborative space at industry associations like APAC Med, forums like EU-ASEAN Business Council, where there can be a collaborative dialogues between agencies, and we can really advance this space of how regulatory policy frameworks should be applied for some of these solutions. And the crux of the matter is that these solutions are disrupting healthcare. They have a potential to, really accelerate universal healthcare as well. And I think you alluded to that, Chris, earlier. And WHO has also said that. Now, that being said, if we are going to do that, we also need appropriate access pathways. By that, I mean regulatory access pathways. And a lot of agencies are doing pioneering work, right? So, I mean, I would not ask us to look very far. HSA Singapore, they are, the torchbearers of fit for purpose regulatory policies in the region. So they are one of the most advanced agencies in the world when it comes to, looking at the total product life cycle of a software or digital solution. And then beyond that, we also have examples from, say, the US FDA, Japan, and these agencies are really starting to reimagine their regulatory paradigm because the realization is clear and it's very instinctive. Digital solutions or software is very different from medical devices, traditional medical devices, drugs, therapeutics, or even in vitro diagnostics. So now what's really needed is a fit for purpose regulatory framework for these solutions, for these digital solutions to come to market. And of course, software and digital solutions are very iterative. So our regulatory frameworks really need to account for these iterations or modifications or changes. And that's where the whole, idea of collaboration lies between the industry and also the agencies, right? So how do we make sure that we are applying fit for purpose controls for these softwares and digital solutions, bring them to patients in an efficient manner? By that, we don't mean that we are going to lower the bar on safety or product quality. That's not going to happen, but it's just that we will be applying regulatory controls which are more fit for these software solutions. I hope that answers your question, Chris.
Thanks, Varun, as always, for the insights there. And again, a good plug for, I think, the effort is, as you rightly said, Roche, but the wider APAC Med Committee and the great content that's being put out. So thanks for that. And maybe just on that point, I come to Dr. John Thornback, who's a co-author on the paper. I think that's a good segue as we kind of round out this paper concept. And again, people, please go check it out. It's public out there. So John is the COO at the Diagnostics Development Hub at A*STAR in Singapore, the national research agency. He's had many years of leading innovation teams and funding teams in such spaces. And as I said, he's a contributor to the paper itself. So John, welcome.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Yeah, thanks. I think that the Diagnostics Development Hub is a national platform in Singapore. Our role really is to develop a whole diagnostics ecosystem within Singapore and to make sure that Singaporeans get access to the best possible health. And that we start off in the diagnostics area. We increasingly are working in the digital health space as well. But an important part of our work is also within the ASEAN area. We have an Asean Dx Initiative where we work with the agencies and with the national bodies of all the ASEAN countries to really look to see how we can promote the growth of the homegrown diagnostics industry, make sure that the ASEAN population get the best possible diagnostic and diagnostic options. But I'd like to sort of take back. I co-chaired the paper which we with Maroon actually on the APAC on the digital health regulation, and I think the most important thing that I think we interpreted originally was how do you differentiate between what's a software in what is a medical device, what is a software as a medical device, what should be regulated and what shouldn't be regulated. And that's the key. We all have these wonderful phones now and watches that provide health information, but are they medical devices? And we should fall back upon what the HSA's definition of a medical device really is, which is diagnose, treat, or alleviate a medical condition. And that's the first point. And that's important because it's diagnose, as you see, diagnostics. Treat in terms of you can think of X-ray therapy machines, or alleviate, and you can think about things like I don't know, hip replacement. Treatment is very interesting because we're now seeing the onset of the first wave of digital therapeutics. And I think this is something which excites me a lot. And Singapore was the first country after the US to register a digital therapeutic product. And that was very interesting how an American company would come to Singapore and come to the ASEAN region. And I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from that as well. But really, in what we worked out from from looking at when we're doing this paper, was really that what we're looking for is a number of different key areas that we're looking for. One is that how do we classify medical software? Because there are some international guidelines. There's the IMDF, the RF N12 guidance, but not everybody guides to that. That fundamentally, we came to the conclusion the best practice was really there are two criteria. One is what's the state of the healthcare situation or condition that the software is intended for. It's critical, serious, non-critical, right? There's, is the information that is being provided, is that information that can be used to treat or diagnose? Can it be, does it drive clinical management, or does it just inform clinical management? And those different circumstances and those medical devices should be classified in those ways. They don't necessarily fall very clearly into the classic categorization that we've seen for medical devices. So that's something which we advocate very strongly, that the risk classification that leads to the way in which products should be harmonized, and there should be a lot of interaction between the different agencies, and because that will help bring products to market and help all the industry to understand and developers to understand what is needed to get products available throughout the whole of the ASEAN region. And another key factor is, what about the software which is used in something like a smartwatch or a mobile phone? How much of that should be regulated? Well, that's really no different to a computer in a lot of ways, a laptop. As they always say, we have now in our hands a computer which is, of course, a mobile phone, which is more powerful than the one that landed people on the moon. So, that's the and so therefore there's a lot of software which is embedded in that, which is not relevant to the medical device application. So we strongly advocate that the software, where it's got multiple functions, only those functions which are part of a medical device should be included. And that leads us, of course, very well to thinking, well, okay, well, what's the other way of doing it? What are other alternative ways? What are people doing? And Japan, Singapore, Australia, the US, and other countries are actually beginning to think very actively about alternative pathways. And I would advise everybody to really look at in detail the different alternative pathways, which are around, some of which are really around recognizing each other, recognition and reliance on recognizing other people's, other agencies' efforts to vet or regulate products, also to rely on data that's presented, that is generated not necessarily in that country. I think those are important. We're also seeing, the pre-certification pathway, which the FDA has trialed. That is something which is based on excellence within the companies and the organizations, rather than on specific, but it's all tied up with the whole life cycle, and tied up with AI and ML as well, and machine learning as well, where you're looking at the total product life cycle. And as Varun has said, the HSA has been very proactive in this respect as well. And how modifications of that pre-certification approach could be used to, could be developed within the ASEAN region to help us get products to the benefit of our populations on the market much quicker, but safely, is very important. And that involves, and so all those alternative regulatory pathways are now coming to the fore, and there's a number of those. And I think in the next couple of years, we will see a lot of those decisions being made by the regulatory authorities. And I think within the ASEAN area, I think there's a lot of interaction between the different agencies and obviously within APAC Med as well, and within ASEAN and the governments as well. So hopefully we're moving towards a situation whereby we will have tailored solutions for the unique environment where we are now. As Chris has said earlier, where there's not a high spend on healthcare, but if we spend it smartly and we embrace new technologies, I think that we can bring up the level of healthcare dramatically for our populations. And finally, really, one of the things that is very encouraging, and I think we've seen that we saw as a very positive step when we were doing the analysis of the different regulatory agencies, is how reactive agencies are. HSA is well known as this, but the agencies now are very proactive. They will sit down, they will talk to people, they will talk to companies, they will talk to developers who are on to help them guide their way through to developing a product which is safe and is useful for the patient populations in our countries. So I think that's where I want to leave it now. The good news, I think I ticked the box that said we've made significant progress, and I think that's true. I think we've made a good start. I think we are seeing both the industry and the agencies all working together. DXD is sort of in between the two, but which is good. And we intend to work increasingly with everybody to make sure that we get the best possible solutions out to our populations as quickly as possible. I'll pass it back to you now, Chris.
Great, thanks a lot, John. And I thought one fantastic part of the report was not only the comparisons within the Asia Pacific region, but as you said, what some other markets around the world are doing in terms of their digital health regulatory pathways. So well done once again on the report, and I hope everyone checks it out. I do see we're starting to get some questions in the chat, which is great. So we'll come to those in just a minute. But as John rightly pointed out, one of the next steps here is to make sure that whatever frameworks we're putting out are being adopted by the country agencies. So we'll round out our panel with two country agencies here. We'll get to hear a little bit more from them, what's on the ground. So first I'll call on Lei Peng, who's the Deputy Director of the Medical Devices Group in the Singapore Health Sciences Authority. She's also very active in the working groups across ASEAN and IMDRF, which John alluded to earlier, and has experience across licensing, policy, pre and post-market surveillance as well. So quite a range of perspectives on the topic. And I do have a question for you, Lei Peng, but is there anything you want to say, introductory comments?
No, I think I have nothing much to add, but it's a pleasure to be invited to be part of this panelist and given the chance to really share HSA perspective and our journey in reaching these steps. I think Varun and Dr. John have given quite a fair bit of introduction on the initiatives that we have taken. And I think it's very grateful to hear such a comment that our work are being recognized and acknowledged by the industry members and our stakeholders. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, my question for you, and I'm going to kind of relate it to a question from the audience. If you would like to address it in that way, you don't necessarily have to. But the question for you was going to be basically, what is the HSA doing in Singapore related to support for digital health and the regulatory pathways? And there's some questions coming in from the audience on specifics around AI, prescription therapeutics, digital therapeutics. So if you want to talk, generally about what HSA is doing in digital health, and if you do want to touch on AI and some of these other areas too, feel free to do so.
Okay, and thank you, Chris. So I think firstly, before we start, I think we need to acknowledge that in the space of digital health, we are really looking at a wide array of products like what you have in your introduction speech, and digital medical devices are only a subset of it. So we do understand that there are various challenges for this group of devices. And as Dr. John has commented, there's always a fine line between whether a digital health product, is it being regulated as a device or non-device depending on the assigned intended use. The same thing, it can be just for general well-being purposes, and it can also be used as intended for a medical purpose. So second thing that we have observed is the stakeholders that we are dealing with. They are no longer the traditional device manufacturer that we used to work with. You have now your mobile app developer, you have your IT companies, or even company that deals with consumer goods. So these are groups that are unfamiliar with the device regulatory space as a whole. And back in 2018, the first step that we did was to come up with a telehealth guideline. So basically, this is the guideline that help us to provide clarity in terms of how we classified digital health product, what we take it as a device and non-device, to provide clarity for this category of devices given the above consideration and above observation. So I would say in this guidance, we are not really prescribing new requirements per se, but rather to act as a clarification document where we share our regulatory thinking and including an explanation of what the applicable controls that are meant for digital health devices. And for digital health products that are controlled as devices in Singapore, they are actually regulated under the same legislative framework as other traditional devices. So the dealers are still required to be licensed by HSA. We are still imposing the same post-market obligation requirements, including pre-market, you have product registration, depends on the device risk class. The risk classification rule, evaluation route remain applicable. So I wouldn't say there would be anything unique or new regulatory requirement for digital health medical devices, but rather I would say it's more during the review or the validation process, there might be some key requirements that are more applicable to software devices. Yeah. The second initiatives that we did is we have introduced a consultation scheme and a priority review pathway to support device innovation for the medtech industry. So the consultation scheme actually provides a channel for companies or for device developer to seek early regulatory advice during the design or device development stage so that they can better prepare for the registration process at a later phase. Whereas for the priority review pathway, it actually offers a shorter turnaround time during product registration. So it helps to facilitate timely access for devices that are designed to address unmet clinical needs. And so far, I think based on what we have come across, the consultation requests that we have received, we do see quite a fair bit, around 30 to 40% that came to us were actually for digital medical devices. So we do see there's an increasing trend of such products that are coming to Singapore. Yeah. So with the experience that we had from the consultation, and given that digital solutions are increasingly become part of the standard medical care, our team last year, we have also published a new guidance document on software medical devices. So this guidance is drafted based on more a life cycle approach where we describe the applicable control at each stage of the life cycle from a development stage to the post-market management. It also includes a key requirement for software devices such as the cybersecurity aspect. If I think I remember just now on the question about digital therapeutic devices or the AI requirements, I think this is a very good document that the companies or the manufacturers can refer to. We do have a specific section within this document that talks about the AI, artificial intelligence medical devices. What is our current regulatory thinking, what's expectation that we are looking at the point of product registration. So this is also a document which is applicable for software medical device as a whole, whether or not you are a standalone software, embedded software, mobile apps, or even your devices for digital therapeutic. As long as it's software driven, it's a software based, I think this is a guidance document that you can refer to. So separately, I think the last thing that we did was we have launched a new webpage for digital health products, also sometime last year. So like what I've shared earlier, the guidance for telehealth devices was in place a couple of years back. So at that point in time, we have actually adopted the term what we call telehealth devices instead of digital health medical device, so that we could actually align to the terminology that are being used by our Ministry of Health. So that was the history on why we use this term. But over the years, we are still receiving queries from various parties, which we thought that might be due to a difference in terminology. So even the information is available online. So for ease of reference and also to avoid confusion, we decided to actually create this webpage. And to adopt a commonly used term, we pack all the relevant information into a single page, and basically it serves as a one-stop reference for stakeholders who are interested in understanding controls for digital health medical devices in Singapore. So I guess all in all, these are the series of initiatives that our team have implemented over the years in supporting digital health device innovation in Singapore. Yeah, I hope it answered your question. Thank you.
Yeah, many thanks, Leping, for joining as well, like for now, so openly sharing about the initiatives that you're working on. Sounds like a lot of great stuff for people to plug into. And I think you've answered a number of questions that had come up through the chat too. So thanks for doing that at the same time. Okay, last but not least, we have Suntara, and then I'll come back through the panel and we'll try to knock out a few of these questions that have come in from the audience before we kind of wrap up. So Suntara in a kind of similar role, but in Malaysia. So he's the Senior Assistant Director of the Malaysian Ministry of Health Medical Device Association there, and a lab scientist by sort of training and background. And I guess Suntara, a similar kind of question for you. So just kind of tell us the latest on the Malaysian digital health regulation, and to the degree you want to dip into concepts like AI, software as a medical device, feel free to do that as well, because there are some questions in the chat about that.
Okay, good afternoon, Chris. Thanks for inviting MDA to be part of this forum. And we are actually happy to share our views and the views on this forum. Okay, when we are talking about the digital medical devices, okay, as for now, we are actually regulating the digital medical device through the normal registration process, just to ensure the safety and able to perform as intended by the innovators. MDA is actually haven't draft any guideline, a specific guideline yet for this digital healthcare devices. Okay, however, we are actually currently doing some studies, okay, to look after and also to develop the guideline focusing on the digital healthcare devices. Okay, but however, we are still the register or the applicant able to register with FDA through the consultation that we are offer. Okay, we are using the traditional way of registration process. Okay, and first of all, as Dr. John and also Leping have shared, okay, of course we will look into whether it's fit to the definition. Okay, it is as a medical device or not, because the current challenges that we are facing right now is on the wearable medical devices, mainly, which is having the multiple functions. Or okay, so we need to look into the definition to fit to the medical device purposes. Okay, and also as a traditional method, of course, we'll look into on the dossier. Okay, but however, there is of course the existing dossier on the medical device registration and also the digital health devices. It is slightly differ on the EPSP and then the software validation, verification, risk management, clinical evidence, and also the labeling and cybersecurity. So these are the elements we got a certain expert on this field, and we used to engage with them, and then we used to advise the public on how to go about it. And apart from existing on the medical device registration, okay, we do have also if let's say they want to advertise this digital medical device, they need to obtain the approval from us, from the medical device authority, and we actually under transition for it. And also on the labeling requirement, okay, of course, all these digital devices, if let's say the innovators from overseas, they will fulfill the labeling requirement, existing labeling requirement, okay. When it's come to the Malaysian market, they need to we got a slightly additional labeling requirement that they need to fulfill, and also they need to adhere to the post-market requirement. And also when we are talking about the to support the digital health product innovation by MDA, it's actually through the consultation session that we offer to the our stakeholders, okay, and also we used to expedite the registration process, and also in terms of international standards, so we do have harmonized international standards. We do accept the international standards for these digital medical devices, okay. And also apart from that, MDA also used to discuss with the regulatory compliance with the innovators that facing any challenges to provide the best solution for it. And just to let you all know, actually MDA also having the innovation committee under MDA. Okay, this innovation committee is actually to support all the medical device innovation, together with include the digital health product innovation. Okay. This committee is actually consists of various agencies, public and private universities, and also the representative from the industries or the innovators. Okay, so as for now, we do have we do have some project in our pipeline. Okay, we want to support the innovators to know or to identify the gap in the ecosystem of the medical device, because definitely when we are talking about any of the medical device, regardless of digital health medical device and other traditional medical device, definitely there is a gap in the ecosystem, starting from innovation up to the commercialization, product commercialization. So therefore, we want to identify the gap, and also we want to assist this the innovators to commercialize the product, at the same time also to comply with the regulatory requirement. Okay, thanks, Chris.
Great, and Sudhar, just like Lei Peng and Ferdinand, thank you for sharing about the initiatives going on. It sounds like some, again, great stuff for people to plug into. So thanks for that. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do here, we don't have a lot of time left, but I'm going to try to kind of ask each panelist one more question that has come through the Q&A. So you guys will have to be a bit tight in your answers if I could ask you that, but that way we can address all the audience kind of queries here. And while we're kind of on, I want to stick on this theme of this kind of Goldilocks concept of digital health, not too loosely regulated, but not overly regulated like a medical device too. Kind of where's that balance? So I think Lei Peng and Sudhar have talked about, you know, concepts like AI and where they're at. So Ferdinand, I'd like to just ask you this question from an ASEAN perspective. There's some questions in the chat around what level of depth is the kind of regulatory harmonization at? You know, is it digital health, or are you starting to get into some of these specific kind of more advanced use cases? And while you're answering that, Ferdinand, Shangar, if you want to kind of flash the second poll here too, we can get the audience view on this too. But yeah, Ferdinand, where are you guys with this kind of Goldilocks level of depth concept, you know?
Thank you, Chris. Are you referring to the questionnaire or a different one?
Just asking you, yeah, at the ASEAN working group levels, you know, how in depth on some of these use cases are you guys going at the moment?
Oh, thank you, because I thought I would be responding to the online poll anyway and explain it. In terms of the ASEAN perspective and ASEAN's architecture, as I mentioned earlier, it's really important that we have a mandate or a policy that would be the roadmap or the guiding force of all of the sectors to move towards one particular direction. And in terms of the discussion that we are having, what are we targeting in terms of the ASEAN with regard to digital health or digital health technology use or applied digital technology? Allow me to share that we have this ASEAN Digital Master Plan for 2025. This is not directly under the purview of the ASEAN health sector, but this is under the purview of the ICT industry sector, particularly linked to the economic pillar of ASEAN. So if ASEAN region has to make strides, uh, valuable strides, progressive strides towards becoming both a digital economy as well as a digital society. It was mentioned earlier by one of our colleagues. Uh, that should be the direction that will be guided by this digital master plan for 2025, which is composed of several objectives and deliverables. So in relation to this, I would also like to share that a substantial portion of the ASEAN population either own a broadband device, either fixed or mobile. They have cloud services that could make it possible to deliver innovative functionality at a lower cost. But then, due to the experiences that we have during this COVID-19 pandemic, it has somehow opened the eyes of policymakers, regulators, and other stakeholders, like the business sector stakeholders, to uh, to take advantage or to acknowledge the advantages of digitally enabling a wide range of economic activities. So you might as well link this with the digital economy, with the digital society, and also removing barriers to digital health solutions or digital technology. So based on this digital master plan for 2025, there are attempts in its activities that would do away with some regulations that will be preventing the take-up of digital services in many sectors of ASEAN economy. And the experience during this pandemic from the health perspective uh, somehow has led, no, or initiated the removal of some of these barriers. In fact, there would be some attempts now to have a systematic review in removing regulations that may be preventing the uptake of digital services in some sectors in ASEAN countries based on the experience of this pandemic. But at the same time, there is also a need to might say have a regional collective move towards achieving this digital economy and digital society, and the region will be guided by this ASEAN Digital Master Plan for 2025. Over. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Ferdinand. Okay, well, let's see what the audience thinks on this kind of level of depth. If you can flash the results, Shangari. Okay, so yes, a bespoke new category needed here, as probably predicted, but at least it reinforces, I think, what all of us are trying to achieve here. So thanks again for your comments on that, Ferdinand. Okay, let me come next to Lei Peng and Sutara, just from the kind of agency perspective again. So there's a few, I think you have both given examples of activities going on that people can plug into. So again, thanks for very openly sharing that. I think there's some questions in the chat around how can the private sector engage, right? What is the role they need to play in the safe adoption of digital health? So in the essence of time, maybe I just ask if you have one recommendation for those in the audience who are in the private sector, and how can they kind of plug into what your respective agencies are doing, or what kind of role do you want them to play? So maybe Lei Peng, I start with you.
Okay. Yeah, I think in terms of the to accelerate the clinical adoption of digital health technology, I think regulatory is only a part of the whole entire ecosystem. I would think that in terms of to promote a sustained adoption for digital health technology, we are actually talking about a broader scope which involves various stakeholders. So you have the user side of things, you have the physician, healthcare institution, you have also other agencies that take look at a different aspect of things. So essentially, I would guess that it's really essential for different parties to work in tandem and to continue the conversation. So from a manufacturer's aspect, I guess it's important to involve potential user at early phase of development. It actually allows them to gather user feedback and to incorporate this feedback as a part of your design input, because this may also encourage clinical adoption at a later phase. We do see cases that you may have a very good devices that have obtained regulatory approval. Unfortunately, they may have a very low adoption rate in clinical practice. Yeah, that happens. So to involve potential user at the early phase, I think it helps. As for regulator, I think we also need to recognize that nothing is stagnant, including the guidelines, the policy that we have put in place. We should always keep ourselves updated from time to time with the development in this evolving landscape to ensure our regulatory approach remains relevant and is fit for purpose.
Very good. And I think, as Varun said earlier, HSA has always been very open, I think, to these types of discussions. So well said there. And Sundar, maybe same question to you, and then I'll come to John and Varun to kind of help us close out here. But I know you talked about the innovation committee. Any other recommendation for private sector in terms of how to kind of engage in the Malaysian context?
Okay, Chris. The innovation committee is mainly for the innovators, but however, we got another one more committee we call as MICC, MDA Industry Collaborative Committee. Okay, in which is like because the MDA Industry Collaborative Committee consists of the representative from the industry associations. All so what they can do is that they also can bring out. But if let's say they are facing any issues on the regulatory issues, okay, then they can bring that to us, okay, via this committee for us to discuss further, okay, because we used to meet up very frequent with in this committee, in which is like we used to discuss further on the initiative and also how we can resolve the problems all that they are facing on the regarding either on the medical device registration or any other issues, or also on the digital healthcare devices. Okay, and apart from that, as I have mentioned earlier, that currently we are doing some studies on to develop the framework or guideline to on this digital healthcare devices. Okay, so we are this committee, the MDA Industry Collaboration Committee, also they can participate and also while we develop this guidance framework, so they can give the input and what are the challenges and how they can contribute the ideas how we can overcome if let's say they are facing any issues. We can sit together and we can discuss together on this.
Great advice.
Okay, thanks.
Many thanks, Sundar. Okay, Varun and John, I know we don't have too much time left, but I think since we've had the discussion today, a few people in the chat have gone out and looked at the report and have got some good feedback about that. Of course, the report is initially focused on Australia, Japan, and Singapore with some reference to Germany and US markets as well. So I think there's some questions in the chat just around how do we bring some of this framework concept that the report is looking at into the ASEAN region. So maybe if one or both of you just wants to comment on some activities or thinking that's underway in this regard.
Varun, do you want to take this first, and then I can follow up to you?
So I think, Chris, there's already a lot of work that is happening at APAC Med level to take this conversation forward, right? So I think we are very clear that we need to make some progressive inroads in ASEAN for having fit-for-purpose regulatory frameworks. So we are collaborating with DXD. We are also collaborating with Center of Regulatory Excellence as well as HSA to have a series of workshops going forward this year in June, and I believe there's one in October. And the idea is to kind of co-create and collaborate and see where those conversations lead us in terms of possibly publishing a roadmap for a regulatory frameworks for digital health towards the end of this year. So, but that is all work in progress. These are conversations that are still kind of taking shape. But the whole premise is that it's already kickstarted this conversation, and this whole collaborative space is going to evolve this year. So I'll give it back to John now.
Yeah, I would reinforce what Varun just said. I think what's impressive is the collaborate. I think what COVID has shown us is that you need collaboration between all the different parties involved. I mean, I think we've seen with during the epidemic, you've seen the fantastic collaboration between the academic side, the agency side, the company side. And really in the digital health space, we can grow, we can build on that and take it forward, especially in the area of, as we move forward in the AI and machine learning space as well, which we haven't had really a lot of time to talk about, but how those products can be brought efficiently to market, which have potential to be very, make dramatic differences in the way in which we diagnose and treat and patients. And we're at the beginning stages of that, and how those are managed, and it will require the collaboration between all the different parties. And I think that's what's very encouraging now, that we are seeing that the boundaries. I'm old enough to remember the boundaries where, you know, there was strict boundaries between the industry, the academia, and the agencies, and those no longer exist. And I think that what we're seeing is a much more collaborative environment. And if we can spread that out, certainly throughout ASEAN, I think we have a very good chance. The ASEAN governments are funding initiatives, as Ferdinand has said, and certainly we've been involved in initiative as well. And there's a lot of an APAC Med is focused as well. So I think what we're seeing is this collaborative environment, which is a very positive thing going forward. And hopefully we can build on that.
Yeah, thanks. And in some ways, I would say that's the essence of what we're trying to achieve here today, right? I mean, we've got some 20 odd countries who've been able to join in. So I hope it was a little bit of learning about the latest developments in digital health regulatory frameworks, but also thanks to many of you for posing your comments and questions out there as well, so we can learn from each other. And I think just to summarize, we talked about the EU-ASEAN Business Council initiative to redesign the sustainability of health systems due to the lingering inequities that do still exist in Southeast Asia. And then we talked about the tremendous potential and wave and kind of promise of digital health. A lot of what our APAC Med and other colleagues on the line are driving the frame around that. And so we kind of coalesce this together in a way that, is basically the strategic role of regulation. So how can regulation be the strategic driver of these two things meeting together? And I hope I've learned many channels for discussion that are out there. And I hope many of you take the opportunity to join in these discussion forums and share your views and get involved. I think that's the kind of key message here. So with that, I know we're over time. We never have enough time. I hope I got through at least the spirit of the questions that people wanted out there. And maybe Shangari, I just hand it back to you, EU-ASEAN Business Council, if there's anything else you guys want to say. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Chris. And thank you so much to all of our panelists for taking time today to discuss this very important issue. And we hope to continue the collaboration. And I guess what's key and what we've learned with this entire digital health solutions is that obviously digitization is key. And just based on that, if I may just shamelessly advertise for our next webinar that will be happening this Friday, which discusses exactly what Dr. Ferdinand spoke about, which is ASEAN's digital roadmap / master plan for 2025. The newly appointed DSG for the ASEAN Economic Community will be speaking and sharing his insights on how best can we get private sector involvement in furthering ASEAN's digital agenda, especially in terms of building the right infrastructure, both soft and hard. So please feel free to register. More details are available on our website. But thank you once again to everyone for spending this past 1 hour with us. Really appreciate your time. Thank you. Stay safe and stay home. Thank you.